What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, the podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Galit. Galit is a relationship coach. She's a PhD student, and she'll correct me on exactly what that is in, because even though
gender studies.
There you go. You told me 30 seconds ago, and I've already forgot. And with her partner, Asael, who you guys know was on the podcast previously. She runs the Potential State website. Is that the Potential State?
The Institute. Yeah, the Potential State Institute for Enriching Relationships.
Yeah. So after that long introduction, there's no pressure on you to hit it out of the park here.
Yay, good. We can play and just be human.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself if you'd like, or
I'd love to.
Anything else you'd like to cover?
Great. Okay. So I am Galit. Relationships are my jam. It's just what I love. It's what I apparently have always been curious about. I look at relationships kind of I'm a sociologist at heart. So I kind of look at how society and our environments, whether that's our family or our community or our society at large, influences the way we interact and engage and the messages we have received and how that gets translated into our relationships. And I'm sure we'll touch more about that, because I think that oftentimes we think that our problems or challenges or fears or baggage that we bring to relationships is on a personal and individual level, but actually I think it's much larger than that, and it's on a social level. So it's a lot of an internalization of the messages that we've received and what we then bring into our relationships from those external messages. So sociologist at heart. So kind of my lens is zoomed out and then zoomed in, and master's in gender studies, and now continuing on with a PhD in gender studies. I like to look at kind of the social constructs of what makes us and our identities. Parenting also is a big part of my journey, and actually what led me to do my PhD. I'm a mom of two. I have a boy named Zach, who's 10, and a daughter named Lila, who's 7.5. And they have taught me more in my journey into motherhood, I think, than any book, class, any other relationship I have ever had. The amount of wrestling with, I call my kids little mirrors, because they confront me with blind spots that I didn't even know I had. The emotions are like on steroids, whether it's rage or love or frustration or disappointment. It's just like everything is heightened when it's your kids. And I don't think that any kind of parenting style book or class can prepare you for that change. No. And also what that does to relationships. I'm a product of parents who are divorced. My mom has been divorced twice. Both parents remarried. So my mom divorced my dad when I was 3, and my mom divorced my stepdad when I was 30. So a lot of insights from that process, and a lot of kind of pennies dropping from seeing my mom divorce when I was 30. So that shed a lot of light on the relationship with my dad and all kinds of things that as an adult I could understand far better than a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I'm sure. There's probably 1,000 questions I have around that. But one of the things that just popped in my head while you were talking about, and this is why I always have a notebook, and we always create an outline, or I always create an outline, because I rabbit holes are frequent. I think I say that phrase at least once a podcast. What is more of an influence on an individual and their relationships, their family or society in general?
So that's a really great question, because I think it's hard to say. I think that our families are so, first of all, it depends on the type of family and how that family interacts in the community, and how, what are the parents like, and how tight that family is and how influenced it is, or aware of social pressures, or, family scripts and kind of the generational pressures that have been, and the messages that they have internalized and kind of hand over to their kids. So that's a really good question. And I don't know if there's kind of a clear cut answer to that. I think that, and that's kind of where I play with the lens, right? Like, I think it's about recognizing what the social constructs are, or what are the messages that I receive within my community or from my family, and where am I able to have agency? Where do I choose? Or what has been kind of so passed on? I was listening, like, why do we do what we do? Is there a place to question why do we do what we do? Or is it just, this is how we do it, and so we continue to do it? And I think that really depends. And it probably also depends on, culture to culture, and different places that we that we live, and how we're exposed, how much we're exposed to other ways of doing things. So
it's probably about environment, I would guess. Like, in terms of,
absolutely,
is your family sort of, like you're saying, sort of small knit and focused on the family, or and strict in regards to maybe a religion or philosophies or whatever?
Totally.
Or is there an allowance of outside society and cultures to
and influence, and absolutely. And I think it's also exposure, right? Like, the more that we're exposed to other things and open-minded about them, then those boundaries might become a bit permeable, and we can become open to new influences and question things. So it's 100%, kind of our environment has a big impact on us.
Well, and one of those things I think that is pretty heavily influenced by society, and probably by family units as well, is men's emotions, what we're allowed to express, what we end up expressing. And I wanted to touch on that with you, because in a pre-interview, we had a brief conversation about this, in terms of, I believe, and I don't think you disagree, in terms of men need to be able to express themselves. You as a female, you have a partner who I was fortunate enough to spend some time with and get to know a little tiny bit. I could tell he's an expressive guy. I don't think there's things that he keeps in. And so I wonder how, even though that's a good thing, quote unquote, I believe it is. And I say quote unquote because I do think that sometimes when women, and I'm not asking you to speak for all of them, I guess I kind of am, like I said in my last episode, but you don't have to take that mantle. But how have you received his emotions? Have you always been receptive? Do you think that perhaps there is a desire for women to have that out of their man, but then not know what to do with it when it comes, because it's so foreign?
Absolutely. So I think that I'm going to break it up into a few pieces. So I think, first of all, right, there's psychological patriarchy, which is basically that we have almost, I almost want to say universally, but I'm not going to be that bold and say universally, but definitely men have received the message. And if men have received this message, then also women have received this message, that men, are stoic. They don't show emotions in the same way. They don't have the full range of emotion. Boys don't cry. That's the messages that you men folk get. And that obviously just kind of continues and perpetuates. And what is the masculine man? And what does that mean in terms of what emotions you can express? And what we then see is kind of this severing of your ability to access your emotions and express your emotions and share your emotions. And then the flip side is that we as women, as your partners, don't know what to do when we say that we want you to open up, and we say that we want you to express your emotions.
Right.
And then you do, and we're like, whoa, scale it back. Yeah. You're afraid, like, whoa, you're feeling pressured about, work and this and mortgages and raising the kid. Like, whoa, like, I can't handle your pressure as well as mine. And I think that then that's kind of where there's this, I think that's where the challenge happens, because if we, and I think this is where kind of it like surpasses gender, right? Because we're all born with a full range of emotion. And unfortunately, because of the messages we receive from our families, from society, we aren't necessarily given the same emotional vocabulary, and we don't necessarily have permission to feel the same feelings, or certainly express the same feelings, or be in touch with those feelings. And then men tend to be, and again, I'm speaking generalizations, and obviously I don't mean to speak in generalizations, but just for the sake of men are kind of reduced to being allowed to feel anger and um and have a sexual appetite. That's it. Right? Like those are the two main things that you're allowed to feel, and anything outside of that is like and then as a result of that, we don't actually know how to handle when you show vulnerability, or when you show fear, or when you show those. We then we feel, and I think in general the real issue is that we don't, as a whole, as humans, we don't really know how to sit with emotions. Any of us.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah.
And I think kind of what's happened now is that there's become much more of an awareness. I don't know whether Corona exacerbated it or just awareness in general, but I think that there is a growing awareness to the fact that regardless of gender, right, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, we don't know how to sit with certain emotions, and we don't know how to express them. And certainly in relationships, we don't know how to allow the person that's with us, our partner, to have them, express them, without having to feel like we have to fix it or solve it. And I know from my personal experience with Asel, it's funny because when you spoke about him just now, you were like, oh, he's very expressive and this, that, and he tattooed feel on his arm, right? I have speak because I need to learn how to kind of, part of women's issues is that we don't know how to express ourselves fully and what we want, and even, our assertiveness or things like that.
Sure.
And for him, it's feel. So I said to him, we were just kind of on holiday, and I was like, you're not sharing with me. You're not telling me, you're not sharing your feelings. I don't know what's going on. And as far as he's concerned, and the impression that he makes is that he does share and he does feel. But I think that in a way, the bar is so low. And I know that there have been times when he has shared, like anxiety or, I don't sleep well at night because I'm worried about, the business, or I'm thinking about the kids, and then as soon as he does that, I can feel my anxiety bubbling up and my fear bubbling up of like, I can't hold his too.
Yeah,
but the work is to remind myself that I don't need to hold his for him.
Right.
I just need to be able to hold mine so that he can share his.
It sounds easy, right?
Oh my God, it's the hardest thing in the world.
I really think it is. And I think all of this, I've been thinking a lot about a lot of these things. I mean, I think about it all the time, but especially lately. And I think it all boils down to the relationship that you have and working it in a way that works for both of you. And sometimes I try to find cookie cutter answers because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Right. Like, oh, if this happens, then do this. I'm very logical. I'm very pragmatic. But I think when you consider family and society, and I think family, especially in terms of your parents, and I think there are so many factors and influences that how you handle something is going to be different than someone else does, obviously. And that it needs to be the internal framework of the relationship to handle it together. And that doesn't always mean, like you were saying, take on his issues, rather just give him, understand, okay, this is the way he is. Now, what do I need to do for him and for me to make sure that we navigate this successfully? And while that kind of sounds easy, it also is, I think it sounds very fucking complicated in some ways too.
It is. It's so complicated because we're not really given tools to do that, right? Like, I don't need to fix any, there's kind of like the cliche joke of like, you don't need the husband saying to the wife, like,
right.
Or the wife complaining to the husband and being like, you don't need to fix it. You just need to listen, kind of thing.
Yes.
But that's true for all of us, right? Like,
yes.
if he's sharing with me, I also need to remind myself that I don't need to fix it. I just need to be able to listen. And it's not a complaint, and it's not a criticism, and it's not something that I need to change or do differently. I just need to give the space. And if we want men to be able to share, we have to make the space, and we have to stop talking about men as if they don't have emotions, can't express emotions, right? Like emotionally handicapped. No, they're not emotionally disabled. They're not emotionally handicapped. They have a full range of emotion. Men, boys, we just need to give them space to express it.
Yeah.
And,
I think it's not, I think it sounds easy. Again, it sounds easy, but
right.
I have questions about because you're a parent of both, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole just yet.
Okay.
But what I do want to talk about,
I will say it's challenging, especially being kind of very, very aware and kind of with everything that I know in terms of kind of gender. And sometimes I find myself still, falling through things. And I recognize that, for instance, with my daughter, I'll say like, oh, be careful, be careful. I'll say way more, be careful with her than I will with him. Right. And like, it's in such small things that we don't even notice. It seeps into our language and our mindset in such small ways. And it really does start at childhood. It starts so quickly.
Yeah. And I think there's a whole conversation there too about the history of that. But again, for another day, perhaps. But
yeah.
But what I do want to focus on is sort of around this men having emotions. And I had this conversation in my last podcast, and I wanted to sort of address this. It's just the perfect time. We talked about this in a pre-interview anyway, but the feminization of men. There are some folks, and I interviewed a gentleman not too long ago who said, standard therapy will tell the man he just needs to get more in touch with his feelings, and he needs to express his feelings, and he needs to get more feminine. I'm paraphrasing with what he's saying, and I believe that to be true in terms of you need to express your feelings and get in touch with them.
Yeah.
I think the standard operating procedure is that means you get more feminine, get more in touch with your feminine. And
right. But that goes back to kind of what I'm saying about like,
yes,
the emotions aren't gender. The emotions aren't masculine and feminine emotions. Yes. That's what society has done. We have placed specific value on certain emotions, and then because in the hierarchies of gender, right, they're masculine emotions and they're rough and they're rugged and they're this and they're that, and then the feminine ones are more soft. Like I just saw something on social media today about like soft skills. Why do we call them soft skills, right? Like they're freaking hard. It's not it's not soft to learn how to be an empathetic listener and to be compassionate. Like that is hard work. Why are we calling them soft skills? So I think it's the same thing with emotions. Like emotions are not masculine or feminine. Yeah. We have done that. We have placed these values and kind of genderized them. And what we actually, in my mind, need to do is kind of strip that away and go back to that's our humanity.
Yes.
Our feelings and our emotions are our humanity, and that's what makes us human. And so if we want to be whole humans, we need the full range. Yeah. If we want to live whole lives, we have to have the full range, and that's incredible joy and bitter sorrow. Yeah. And we all have that. It's just that some of us have permission and access and language, and others don't. And it's kind of ironic because just now when I said that, I realized like in the gender wars, right? Like that's what it's about, is that men traditionally have had in certain spaces access, language, permission, and women have not. So maybe that's also part of the issue, is that women aren't willing to hand over the emotional world and sphere, because, we have to be queens of some domain.
Right.
But I think that if we want to see society getting to a healthy place, each side needs to kind of put down the keys to the world and be like, we all need full access. That's what equity looks like. We will all be better off if we all have permission, access, language.
No, I agree. And I think I want to clarify that, because no one has challenged me or anything. But I felt after doing that episode, and it just came out. So, I don't know if everyone has had an opportunity to listen, but I felt like afterwards, like maybe I was shitting on men a little bit too much, and also pushing for men to be feminine. But that doesn't, by the old definition or the, I don't know, classic definition, it didn't mean that I want men to, suddenly start doing their makeup or whatever. Like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Of course.
I just want them to access these emotions, because at the end of the day, I want men to stop killing themselves because they can't.
Yes. So you want men to stop severing the softer side of them. Yes. And I think I always think about yin and yang, like, and I think that that's what it is. Like, when we're whole, it just always kind of sounds, because it always sounds like so kind of new age and yin and yang, but it's true. That's what it's about, right? We have a dark side, we have a light side, we have a soft side, we have a harsh side, and we all need to be able to bring more of that. And women need to access their assertiveness and their aggression, I would even say.
Yes.
Like we also, and we have a lot to learn from men. And I know that Estelle and I often have these conversations. And I think that's part of why we also started working together in the clinic with couples, because we each bring the different perspectives. And if you want to have that 360, if you want to have that wholeness, then you need to learn how to engage with it and access both. And I think that oftentimes in our relationships, that's actually the beauty of it, right? Like, where I am lacking a little bit, it's possible that my partner has a bit more. And so they can fill my cup a little bit in the places that I can't, and I can fill their cup. But I think that's where we need to be open and receptive. And I think that part of the issue is that as a society, we have, like I said, we've severed men from their emotions. And so they don't know how to access it. And then if they do, their partners don't necessarily know how to hold that space and continue to encourage them.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's not just...
And I'm sure you weren't shitting on men. I'm sure you were like...
I'm sure some
guys... Come on, brothers, let's heal.
Well, exactly. That's what it is. I just want them to stop killing themselves over things that are difficult, are hard, but survivable if we have these fucking skills. And yes, they're considered feminine skills, I suppose, but as I am learning and growing and evolving, and I'm saying, fuck that. They're human skills.
Exactly.
Period.
Yes, they're human skills. And I'll say for myself, like, there's a lot. I was just thinking about this today, actually, because Estelle and I also have been focusing a lot on our parenting. And I'm playful by nature, but I think that it's actually, and he's kind of self-taught play. That's kind of what he has anchored, and that's what his doctorate was on. And I think that it's funny, because I think that had I not met him when I did, and had he not kind of had that anchoring in play as a man, he had permission to continue to play. And as a woman, I think I would have had to kind of let that go. But because that's what I'm saying, like, that as partners, we can really help each other. And I think that oftentimes watching him play and still be able to play and, not care what society says, because he had, there are certain things that he can do because he's a guy.
Yeah.
That I look at, I'm like, wait, I can do that too. That's fine. I can play. I can be 38 and play. Like, who says I can't?
Right.
So I think that we have so much to learn from each other if we just are willing to kind of like put our guard down. We just need to put the armor down.
Agreed. I think that's a large part of it.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I think you're open too, to other things, to other ways to,
Yeah.
maybe I can be a man and I can cry. Maybe that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe that is okay.
Absolutely.
So let's shift a little bit. So in terms of then, the question can become, what is masculinity then? What is desirable to a female? What do you, as a attractive female, see as masculinity, or what are the things that you would look for that you consider masculine?
Yeah, I love that question, and I've been thinking a lot about that. And I have to say that, like, I do want to kind of caution because, like I said, I think it's important that it's a conversation.
Yes.
And that, men, if they're listening and kind of adopt some of this stuff, that they like prepare their partner, because I think that otherwise they might not get the response that they want. And I wouldn't want that to happen. But I think that vulnerability and sharing your emotions and your feelings, by the way, the full range. I think so often we think that sharing emotions means sharing the hardships and where we're afraid, but it's also sharing the moments of joy. And I think that oftentimes we kind of overlook that because we think, oh, well, obviously I'll share the happy moments, or I'll share the moments where I looked at you and thought you were beautiful, or I looked at you and thought, you're a great mom, or I looked at you and thought the kids are amazing. And so we don't share that because, like, obvious, but no, that, like, I would say, do you know what I would say? I would say the first place to start sharing is with the good stuff. Like, you have a good thought, you have a positive emotion, you feel content or happy or surprised by something your partner did or said. And it can be little. Share it, say it, say it. I think that's huge. And also, it's funny because I was just having a conversation with a girlfriend of mine, and she said that, ironically, moms who are divorced kind of have a more equal relationship with their ex, right? Like, they get more free time, the, custody's split. There's more like equal parenting than moms who are in relationships and who kind of take the burden. And that kind of relates to maternal gatekeeping, because oftentimes mom's like, no, I can do it myself. No, I got it. It's all on me. And they don't actually ask for help. Or if they ask for help, they don't actually allow help because they want it a certain way.
Yeah.
But actually, if we kind of changed our mindset and thought we don't have to wait to get divorced to have equal shared more contribution in the house.
Yeah.
But that means that each side, someone needs to step in and someone needs to tap out a little bit. And actually, it's mom that needs to tap out.
Yeah, I think there's so many facets and topics that could be discussed, and that's one that is probably for another one. But what I would say is, I think that's a huge struggle right now for both men and women, because it's no longer a one workforce household, right?
Right.
Both parents are out in the wild, but there's still that. Like, for me, for instance, I'm a Gen Xer. My mom did not work. She did when we were young. She did, and then eventually she started going back into the workforce. But so that's my template. That's my now. That didn't mean that I expected her to be chained to a stove, but the template was, well, mom did the cooking, mom did the cleaning, mom did the dishes,
mom does the laundry, mom puts away the clothes, mom finds the activities, mom gets the snacks, mom. And now it's changing. It is changing, and we need to make space. Like, that change needs to come from both of us.
Yes.
Like, I know that I need to let go of how the laundry will be folded if I want Estelle to do it.
Yeah. Right.
I can't, like, in that sense, I got to let it go. Like, what do I prefer? Do I prefer to fold it my way, or do I prefer to have 10 minutes that I can do something else? I prefer to have those 10 minutes. And, like, but I think that even that can be a conversation.
Yeah.
Because
Oh yeah.
maybe, because
Yeah.
maybe some mom would be like, no, no, it's got to be my way.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I want to invite couples to have those conversations, and I want to invite moms to like, you can take a step back. It's okay.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I went into my relationship with a sale, and I grew up thinking that fathers were overrated. That was what I
Really?
learned from home. That was the sentence that was the narrative. That was the
Yeah.
narrative that I kind of grew up with from my mom.
Mm,
And it's not true. It's not true. Fathers are not overrated.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And kids have a lot to learn, especially if fathers kind of start tapping into their emotions.
Mm,
That's just going to do a world of good. If kids can see their dads,
yeah.
bringing a soft side and their playful side,
Yeah.
you know, then wow, we'll all win.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. And it's one of the things that divorce exacerbates in a way, the different roles, and I have to take on, obviously have to take on things that maybe I well, not maybe, things that I didn't in the past, wholeheartedly. Like maybe I
Yeah.
helped with laundry, but now I got to do the laundry.
Right,
Um,
right.
and there are days when it gets done and sits in baskets for like a week and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm not folding that
Also
shit.
here, also here, also here.
Yeah.
But yeah, but absolutely. I mean, but I feel like if couples can start talking about it and playing with it and recognizing that, like, because I think often what happens is because of society and kind of like pressure. I know I felt a lot of pressure to be a certain mom,
Mhm.
and certain things meant that I was a good mom. And, if I had a clean house and tidy and this and that, like
Right.
all these things, and I had to do it all by myself. I think oftentimes we get the message as women that like, if we want to be good moms, we have to do it all by ourselves. No, we don't have to do it all by ourselves. And you know why we fold the laundry better? It's not because we're better at it, just because of like nature. It's
Right.
because we have more experience, because we've done it more times. If we let you guys do it, then
Yeah.
you'll be good at it too. Like,
Very, very true.
so there's something to be said for kind of like moms tapping out, letting go, and letting dads step in a little bit and doing it their way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think again, it's a conversation, it's a comfort level, it's an openness. Hey, let's do this because this
Yeah,
isn't working. Whatever this is, it's the sometimes I think it's one of the more difficult things is the ability to have an uncomfortable conversation.
absolutely.
But those uncomfortable
Absolutely.
conversations can lead to some successes.
Yes, they're crucial.
Yeah.
They're crucial. And I think that that's part of what we all as humans need
Yes.
to learn, is to like sit through the uncomfortable ones, because they're only uncomfortable in the moment, but the reward and benefit of sitting through those uncomfortable conversations is huge. And it actually, if we kind of get the tools to do it, then we get better at it.
Well, I wonder.
And they're not so uncomfortable anymore.
No, true. The practice is,
Yeah.
essential
Yeah.
for any skills. I want to shift back to masculinity a little bit, and talk a buzz phrase, I guess, toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
Which some men lose their mind over that little phrase because they think.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak for men.
Yeah, please do.
They think that means that masculinity is toxic. That's not what it means. It means that there are certain things that men do that are considered masculine that, frankly, are fucking toxic. So,
yes.
let's
Wow,
dive
you could
into that.
you defined it perfectly. I think that
Yes.
what is toxic are certain things that have been like, the same thing with like, oh, certain emotions are,
Yes.
Feminine. So the same thing, certain behaviors that men have been allowed to do or have done have become toxic. And I think the main one is assuming that this kind of like obliviousness to other perspectives or other experiences or other realities. And I think that once I think in my mind, like that's at the heart of it. this kind of not even recognizing that someone can have a very different experience than what I've had.
True.
Right? Like assuming that like my experience is the truth. That in my mind is at the heart of toxic masculinity. And if it, and I think as soon as men recognize, and I don't know, I'm not a man, so maybe there are other things kind of that you've noticed, and maybe you have a fuller list. But in my mind, that's like at the heart of it. That if you're willing to put down and recognize that like my truth is only my truth,
right?
Let me hear your experience. Then that will be the bridge, or at least the start.
Yeah, I think it's taking that stoic way way too far. In that, like, you don't care about anything or anyone. Like, you just have your way, and that's your,
because you don't even recognize that there are other ways.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that I can see why men maybe get kind of upset, because I don't think that they intended for that to happen.
Sure.
And so now to kind of acknowledge, like, yeah, it's a big whoops, like, whoops. Whoops, sorry about that.
Right.
Okay, there are other realities that we have not taken into consideration, and we will do better next time.
Yeah, I think it comes down to it's becoming so. I just keep coming back in my mind when I think of toxic masculinity. And I've seen it, honestly. I've seen it. Don't cry, don't feel. That, to me, that's
this like Lone Ranger. You don't need anybody. You don't need anything. Like poker face. Don't show emotion.
That's
who
toxic.
Wins? That is so toxic. You know what happens? You die inside.
Well, and I think I really truly think it does lead to suicide. Especially when men are faced with really catastrophic, traumatic, emotional events in their lives, and they have no ability to handle it.
Yeah.
Especially.
Amen, brother.
I'm a bit biased, but especially divorce, because not only are men generalizing, they isolate. They're alone, and then they lose their emotional
because you can't talk to anybody. You can't talk to anybody. You've cut everybody off, right?
Yes.
Because what connects us at the end of the day, what gives us humans that ability to emotionally connect? Emotions. Like we connect on the emotional level. That's what we by sharing our experiences, our thoughts, our inner worlds, so you've become a poker face. Nobody can come in contact with you. You can't share outwardly. You don't have you don't know how to express. You don't even know how to necessarily identify what you're feeling, or even acknowledge that it's painful, that it's scary, that it's sad, that it's hard. And yeah, you're right. Then you're on your little man island all by yourself.
No, I sometimes I think one of the challenges that I face is I'm really, going forward, my focus is going to be, I haven't said this on the podcast before, but I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be a guide for men to get through divorce, but in a different kind of way. So my intention is, and I'll get to my point here in a second. My intention is to start bringing men together, particularly men that are going through divorce. And when they get together, and I think AA is the best template for this. When they get together, they need something to guide them in their meetings and their interactions.
Definitely.
And hey, remember step whatever, and are we doing that thing?
Oh, right? I love it, Michael. 100%. But I think it's a men's circle.
Yes,
it's a men's support group.
Yes, and the trouble that I'm even finding it now. Before I have somewhat of an infrastructure. I have a website, and there's some private groups there that men can join. I am having trouble, but I'm not a quitter by any stretch of the imagination. But I am having trouble getting men to come together to say, fuck this isolation thing. Let's do something together. And I am struggling to get men to do that. And I know we've kind of covered some of this, but why am I struggling so bad? Like, why is it so hard to get men together?
Because men have been taught that they are self-sufficient, that asking for help is weakness, that emotions are not for them. And you have all these, and there's shame.
Yeah.
Shame is so big. And I love Brene Brown.
Me too.
I don't know if yeah. So yes. she talks about how I'll never forget her. So I read her first book about shame, and the whole book is about women and shame. But at the very end, she has this one point where she says that a man at the end of her conference came up to her and said something like, you say you want to hear about men's shame, but then nobody really does.
True.
And that, for all the points that we covered, it's, and shame thrives on the isolation, right? And not speaking about it and not sharing. So I think you'll have to go through like the back door and like invite guys over for beers and stuff and like sports games, and then through that kind of open it up. I don't know. I'm hoping that there's a new masculinity.
Yes.
And I think that there is. I think that there's kind of a budding new masculinity that is a bit more aware and forthcoming, and men who do recognize that. And also, we don't want to be alone, right? Who wants to be alone?
No, nobody. And I think what I come back to sometimes when I think about this stuff, this challenge, I think about it's really hard to open up. I think for people, but I think for men especially. Yeah. And therefore, if we are men, if you want to look at it that old school pound on your chest type of view, well, then why the fuck aren't we doing the hard things?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love it.
I mean, it's easier to ignore your feelings.
So much easier. It's so much easier.
Stuff it down. I mean, eventually it bites you in the ass. I believe that.
It does. It does.
But if it's hard to open up, to be vulnerable, then why aren't we fucking saying, all right, I got this.
I love it. Yeah. I'll be a man and I'll do it. I'll cry.
That's what a man, that's me. It's your shit. Own it. It's yours.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think
that's the manly thing. That's the manly thing to do.
In my view, I mean, I think that's more manly than pretending that you're not hurting. Give me a fucking break.
Absolutely. I think that there's something so courageous in being able to admit that you're afraid.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's courage. Or share that you're in pain, or even express tremendous joy. Yeah. Like, all those things take so much courage because they're so raw. And unfortunately, they're also so rare.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I don't think it's exclusive to men. I think it's
right. I agree. I think
expressing feelings and emotions and facing them head on, it's hard, man. It's really
so hard. I have to say, I this past about 2 years ago, I kind of transitioned to be self-employed and work a lot more with Asa and in the clinic. And I had to also meet myself, right? I had been used to, working in an office and part of a team, and, and it was like a very different, it was very different. And it was a transition that I wanted and I sought out. But I had to kind of meet myself in terms of worth and value and productivity and working, independently, and like meeting myself every day was so hard and so exhausting. And that emotional work is challenging.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think, and we all, if we want to live whole lives where we feel like we belong and we're close to the people we love, that's part of it. Yeah. That's part of it.
I want to shift to your story a little bit. It just popped in my head, as things often do. And being that you went through a divorce as a child, and it sounds like there was some of what happens, I think, with men when they go through a divorce and they get very angry at women. It sounds like, and I don't want to put words, but it sounds like your mother maybe was very mad at men.
She was, and actually, I have to say that we just had a big fight about this a couple of days ago. It's really funny. Yes. So for many years, so I didn't even let you finish your question.
Well, I was just going to ask, like, how did that affect you?
Yeah.
And if it was in a negative way, in that you picked up that belief system from her, how did you get out of it? And if you didn't, how did you not?
I did pick it up from her because, like I said, I grew up thinking that fathers were overrated. So I grew up with the narrative that fathers are overrated, men are useless, and and for many years, I did not have a good relationship with my dad. And there were even a few years that I didn't speak to my dad. And I think what helped me was, first of all, a master's in gender studies.
Education.
Education and a recognition of, what are the messages that we get and what are the messages that we perpetuate, and how do these serve or don't serve us. And the other thing that helped me was that I married a man who has dedicated his life to couples and family therapy. And when we started dating, we talked a lot about parents and our families and what we learned through our families and fathers and father figures. And I think that when we got married was when I started to kind of reconcile my relationship with my dad. And then I think when my firstborn was born, my dad flew out to see me and spend time. He was the first grandson. And, becoming a parent also changes a lot of things. You gain so much perspective and you kind of see things differently. And I think that I also recognize that I was hearing one narrative, but I wasn't hearing, there's always more than one narrative. There's always more than one, we each have a side to the story and there are multiple truths and both stories are right. And I think that really kind of changed the nature of my relationship with my dad. And then from there on, I sought out my dad's narrative. So during Corona and lockdown, I would have Zoom calls with my dad. So, and this was only like, 2 years ago, I guess, or a year and a half ago, where we would have, weekly calls on Zoom, and I would say, tell me your story, tell me your side of things. And I was older, and so I could hear them in a different way, and I could, kind of bring together the different stories that I had heard from my mom and the different stories from my dad, and then I could kind of create my own narrative.
Do you mind if we dive into that a little bit more specifically, just in terms of ages and stuff, and if it's too personal, whatever. I understand.
There is no too personal.
I would say, based on what you're saying, you were alienated. Is that a fair description of? Because that's a big buzzword in the circles of divorce, is parental alienation, and it sounds like, in a way, yours would be a textbook case of that.
Alienation sounds a bit harsh, but I mean, there was kind of a long distance because my mom remarried a man from the States. So we relocated to the States for 4 years, and my dad was still, I'm in Israel. So my dad was still in Israel. Now he lives in New Jersey and I live in, so like There was some international stuff going on, but I do have to say that recently, and I think this is important, recently I had a conversation with my mom about something, and I asked her a question about her, and she said, well, your dad and your stepdad. And then I was like, wait, but I'm not asking about them. And then later, the conversation kind of escalated into an argument. And she said, well, you were very defensive. And I said to her, yeah, I was defensive because when I heard you saying my dad and my stepdad, that already in my mind triggers that you're going somewhere negative because you usually speak about them negatively. And that's been with my dad for many years. Like only recently has she kind of, I guess, I don't know, gone through her own process. And now feels differently, but yeah, I mean, that's
there's so much here. Okay. So
I know a lot.
Did you have any resentment because maybe he allowed, or the fact that you were able to be separated from your father, did you have any resentment towards him for that?
So I think as a child, there's so much you don't know as a kid, and you piece things together, and I think kids pick up on everything.
Yeah.
In terms of if we're talking about emotions, like they pick up on everything in terms of their emotions. And then I think where we mess them up as parents and adults is that we don't necessarily, we kind of fill in the gaps or don't fill in the gaps or tell them, oh, no, don't be sad because this and this. Right. And then we actually sever their emotions from what their understanding of reality is. I think that I felt my dad didn't kind of make wasn't interested. But in hindsight now, I know that, he was, working his butt off. We were far away. It's, it was expensive to call. It wasn't in the days of internet. It was expensive to call. There's a time difference. Like there's so many factors that as a child, who thinks about that? Nobody thinks about that.
No.
And now as an adult, I can. And I think that, and I recently said this to my dad. I said, I'm so happy that you very kind of quietly just, you were always you always tried, you were always there, but never like just the right amount, like he wasn't too pushy. It was never kind of like, you have to talk to me, I'm your father kind of thing. It was always just like, these quiet check-ins, like maybe now she's ready. Maybe now she wants to communicate. Maybe now but never with pressure, never. And eventually and now we don't talk often just because of, time differences in life and kids and that. But like when we do, I really enjoy talking to my dad. And I've really learned to see an incredibly warm, insightful, hardworking person who I just didn't see as a kid. But I think my most important kind of message to dads who maybe are struggling with their kids is like, just hang in there and like be patient and keep at it in a very like warm, soft, because like just leave the door open.
Yeah, I think the truth always comes out. And I think, especially, I think I'm biased. I'm a father. Yeah. The father-child relationship can't be severed. It just can't be. Yeah. And I'm not saying that mother's child can be. I'm just saying for sure. I feel it. Yeah. And these types of stories, it makes me emotional because despite what happened, and this isn't to trash your mom or anything, but despite what happened, despite some mistakes on her part, I'm sure it sounds like she's getting to the point maybe of realizing some of these mistakes, but your connection didn't go away. It might have been strained right. And damaged, but it didn't go away. And eventually, things came back around. At what age did you start questioning things in terms of my dad's a bad guy? Like at what age did you go like, maybe not, maybe he wasn't so bad?
You're not going to like my answer, but like
No,
I think when I, I think when I started to get, I think when we got married, so I was like 28,
mm,
28, 30,
yeah.
and I had
I
kids of
mean,
my own also.
I think
I
an
think,
answer, as
I
long as you,
think also having kids of my own, like really,
yeah.
really made a big shift. Also, I have to say, as a mom, I was like, I wouldn't want to do this alone. Like, thank
Mm.
God, that I have a Sel who because I had a really hard time transitioning into motherhood.
Mm.
It's still one of the roles that I struggle with most. I
How,
I
how
there's
so?
there's a lot. It's hard. It's so hard.
It is.
Parenting is so hard.
Yeah.
And you're confronted, like I said at the beginning, like you're confronted with emotions just on a level of like you see parts of yourself that I think you don't get to see in any other relationship. Um, and I think that it's also like it's a heavy lift.
Yeah.
And so to be able to kind of share that,
Do you do you feel guilt over those feelings of being really hard, and like do you feel like you're doing it wrong, or that you shouldn't be thinking of it so hard, or
my motherhood, my
yes, of being a mother?
so I think for a long time I had a lot of guilt and shame.
Yeah.
I struggled a lot with breastfeeding with
Hmm.
Zach, my oldest,
Hmm.
and and I was convinced that I was a failure as a mom. I was just convinced that that's what it was, and and ironically, I think that is part of what allowed Asael to take a more central role because
Hmm.
he had to because I was just busy shaming on myself and just being guilt ridden and
Did you share that with him? Was he
it took
aware?
me a while. I usually kind of have kind of verbal diarrhea and I just get everything out. But with this one, the shame was so big, it was
Hmm.
so great. And the smack between the gap, I think that the larger the gap between expectations and reality
Uh,
is, the harder you fall
yeah.
and the greater the shame or the guilt or the mess.
Yeah.
And for me, the expectation and reality, there was such a big gap that that really kind of, I don't know what the word is, but that's what got in the way of my transitioning into motherhood. I had to figure out how I kind of bridge that gap. But now because guilt, I think there's some guilt that's like in place when you in your moral compass where you kind of do the wrong thing. But I think that oftentimes we feel guilt and that's kind of socially constructed. So I'm really trying to get rid of that.
Do you think?
Like,
And I again, I'm asking you to put on a an educational hat rather than a spokesperson hat. Do you think that that's perhaps that guilt and shame of not doing it right as a mother causes issues and perhaps ends some marriages?
I think what happens is that we don't realistically share and talk about the transition into parenthood. And then each parent is dealing with these emotions that nobody talked about, that nobody spoke about. And so they're each like, oh, so it must be just me
Yeah.
because nobody else has talked about it. And then this wedge starts to emerge in their relationship and then it just grows. And so I think that, and add to that sleep deprivation because you've just come home with a baby and frustration and inexperience and pain or healing and it's a mess. It's a mess. And I think that one of the biggest disservices we do to young couples young families, young parents, is that we don't realistically depict that transition into parenthood. And we don't give skills and tools for couples
Mm.
to share what happened from, birth.
Mm.
Like when I gave birth to Lila, our second, it was a very traumatic birth. Like she was born 6 weeks early.
Oh,
It was
wow.
an emergency C-section. I said wasn't allowed into the operating room. And I remember afterwards, I was like, tell me what happened. Tell me what your experience was. And I think that so often we don't ask dads,
Mm.
how was the birth for you? Like what was that experience like for you? We don't do it enough for moms. We don't celebrate and give them space to like we don't acknowledge as society like the momentous experience of birth and that postpartum time. But we also don't do it for dads.
Yeah.
It
What's
the hierarchy becomes baby, mom, dad.
Yeah,
And we
for
need to
sure.
just get rid of the hierarchies because they're not serving anybody.
I'm just curious in terms of maternity leave in Israel. How do you guys? Because it's virtually
Yeah, I
non-existent.
know it's non-existent in the States. It's
Yeah, it's
really
terrible.
unfortunate. It's yeah. We get 15 weeks paid maternity leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
Civilized society. How interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like France gets like 6 months, but
Yeah, well,
yeah.
15 weeks I think is
Yeah.
I don't know what we get. Honestly, I don't even remember. It's like
I think you get
six
like
weeks.
2 weeks. I think you get 2 weeks paid and you can take like 6 weeks
I think
sick leave,
yeah, I think you're
something
right.
like
Yeah.
that. And
And
that's
that's
if
just
you're like lucky.
and that's the mother
Yeah.
too. The father doesn't get
Right.
anything, which is
Right.
also equally kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Um
It's terrible.
yeah. I don't think it sort of sets the tone, I think.
Absolutely.
I wonder, are
Absolutely.
there countries, again, I'm asking you things that you may not even be familiar with, but are there countries that are much better at teaching mental health and skills? Because America doesn't teach jack shit about it, clearly.
So I
Um,
don't know in terms of kind of like education. I know the Scandinavian countries do a really good job in terms of parental leave and parental equity and things like that.
mm,
But I don't know in terms of kind of emotional and mental health. I don't know.
yeah.
I actually
I
don't know
mean,
the answer to that.
it should be something mandated in schools everywhere. Like
Absolutely.
it affects everything. We live
Absolutely.
in a society that we're not as concerned with where are we getting our next meal. I mean, obviously they're poor folks and all that, and I'm not trying to comment on that kind of stuff, but I'm just saying our a largely a large the largest struggles in our lives now are mental and emotional,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and you would think somebody would teach us some fucking skills.
Yeah, it's time. It's time. Well, that's why that's why Michael, you're doing what you're doing. We're doing what we're doing.
Speaking of, let's jump into that. Let's talk about what are you guys doing? I say I spoke about it a little bit, but please talk about potential state and what you guys do
Sure.
there.
So we have a clinic. We see couples together separately. I work with moms. Asael also works with couples individually. My favorite is when we work with couples together. We also do webinars, have lectures. And yeah, we're on thepotentialstate.com and we put out some videos. We've got a YouTube channel where we try and kind of break down some concepts, share things that we've gone through, our dynamics. I bring kind of the social gender lens. Asael brings his couple and family therapy, a lot of improv play to the mix. And yeah, we try to have fun and heal the world one couple at a time.
So let me ask you two questions about that. Sort of what has been your biggest struggle as a couple, something that you guys really struggle with, but we're also able to overcome.
I love that. That's a great question. I'll tell you what we're struggling. So it goes in phases, like, right? It's like the Mario Brothers. Like we can go to the next level.
Right.
We are currently struggling and working on I forgot the word in English. One second, I have to find it. like collaboration,
Oh, okay.
working collaboratively
Mm,
and not competitively.
mm, interesting.
So trying to, I think, again, the messages we receive from society is to be the best and better, and the language is competitive. We focus on winning, but not within ourselves and being the best necessarily winning, right? Like winning is a construct,
Yeah.
right? So like it's relative, like who determines what winning is.
Yeah.
So I think that for us, it's kind of recognizing when we're in competition and when we're in collaboration.
Mm,
I also thrive working with a team, and
mm,
Asael has for many years worked on his own.
mm,
And so it's kind of bridging the gap of how do we bring our gifts together without one-upping each other,
mm.
without trying to compete, without letting egos get in the way. And I think that is something that, and I'm not just talking about in the business. I actually think in our, like in the clinic, there is no ego. We don't bring our ego there. I actually think it's like with parenting
Mm.
or with family, or because we're both extroverts. So like, who's
Right.
or and various opportunities like that. But
And how do you tackle these things? Is it merely based around something as simple as conversation?
if only conversation were that simple, Michael.
Is that the
That's, yeah,
strategy?
that's where we start. We start with, naming it, name it to tame it, name it to tame it, talking about it. And where did I feel like you one upped me? And where did I feel like because some of these things are ours, right? Like
Sure.
if I feel insecure, that's not necessarily because he was one upping me. That's just because I was feeling insecure. That has nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
So it's sharing it for me to look at and for me to observe,
Yeah.
not for him to necessarily change his behavior. I don't want him to shine less bright because he's worried that I can't handle it.
Yeah.
The idea is what we strive for is that each one of us as individuals in our relationship can shine the brightest we can shine. And if we each shine super bright, then we'll be even shinier together.
Yeah. A similar question about the work that you do. Um, I'm always curious in terms of like success and wins. Um, and that's, I think life is really, definitions are so important, and life, kind
Yeah.
of like you said, like what does winning mean? But in
Right.
your eyes, what has been a victory or a really satisfying um, conclusion to a situation where a couple was just not doing well, and you were able to sort of get them on track? Do you have any of those kinds of things that stick out to you, that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we see couples in the clinic who, they go to the next level.
Yeah.
They go like we're working with one couple, and um we joke that like when they come in and they're arguing about like the dishes or like you did this, you did that, like we call that pishikaki. Have you ever seen the movie Crazy Stupid Love? Ryan
Mm-hmm.
Gosling is
Yes.
always like, it's pishikaki. So like we call that pishikaki. Like, and then we give them the tools, we give them the skill set, we give them the language. And then all of a sudden you see that the arguments are not about pishikaki. They're about emotions,
Yeah.
right? You start having a different conversation of like, I was scared here. I was, disappointed here. And that's a whole different conversation, because the pishikaki is we're not able to speak our emotions, so we act it out.
Mm.
And if you're able to get to like speaking the emotions, you don't have to act it out. You just have to you have to hold the space in a different way. And
Um,
that's like the best. That's amazing to be able to kind of witness that.
as things often do, something else popped in my head. I've noticed in doing what I've been doing for 2 years now, with divorce support and stuff, that oftentimes it seems like women check out. It varies. 2 years, I've heard, 1 year, whatever it is. But it does seem like once a woman makes up her mind that she is done, Is that have you seen any of that sort of experience where it wasn't possible to come back? I guess I'm trying to provide not hope necessarily, but clarity maybe to someone who is just in the beginning stages, and they're hopeful that perhaps the relationship can be mended. And I don't want to say it can't be, but in my experience, it typically, when a woman's done, she's done.
Yeah.
And I say that to give hope on the other side, that there is life after divorce. There is growth after divorce.
Yeah.
Should you choose. But in your experience, and as a woman, is that something you have seen or noticed, that once she's done, she's done?
So it's funny because usually when couples come to, I think from my personal experience, yes. Yeah. Like, in other words, in my personal life, from my mom and from friends and but I think that what we've seen is that when couples come to the clinic, if they're ready to work and they don't just want like a bitch fest, then they're ready to work. Yeah. So like, if your wife wants to go to therapy, go.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, agreed. I think if they're willing to do the work.
And I think if she doesn't, then, because I think, again, like with my mom, I think in hindsight, I think I realized that actually maybe she didn't want to go to therapy. Like maybe it wasn't my stepdad that didn't want to go to therapy. Maybe it was her that didn't want to go to therapy. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think there is something to what you're saying about, like, when she's done, she's done. But also, like, let's not get there. Yeah. Let's try and not get there.
Yeah. I don't wish it upon anyone. I certainly would prefer the latter scenario. Yeah. Galit, this has been as awesome as I thought.
Yay, thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I feel like we could do this for probably another 2 or 3 hours, but I'm sure you got stuff to do, and my kids are here, so I'm gonna go spend some time with them.
Yes, go dad them.
Yes. So we covered your state, your website, potentialstate.com. Yep. People could check you out there. As you said, you have your YouTube channel. I'll put all this stuff in the show notes, and when I post it, I did it for Asael's episode as well. I'll do it for yours.
Sweet.
The last question I ask everyone is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man who's just starting out his divorce process?
Oh, wow. I'm going to give you my stepdad's advice, and he is amazing and wonderful, and he's 3 times divorced. So he's got a lot of wisdom, and he's like lived life. The first to forgive is the happiest.
I'm just going to sit with that for a moment. So if you guys are wondering why the fuck isn't he saying anything?
Yeah, it's a really good one that I keep with me. The first to forgive is the happiest.
Yeah, that's profound.
Harder said than done. Ooh. Harder said than done.
Oh yeah.
But so good. Yeah.
I can't argue it. I can't argue it. It's excellent advice.
Yeah.
I hope, I don't know if I'll be the first, but I hope that I get to that point someday. I struggle with it. But I hope someday I get there. So. Thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, don't jump off.
Okay.
As soon as we're done, I got something I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
Going forward. But again, thank you very, very much for doing this. I'm sure we will do it again. And I thank you and Asael for being so open and vulnerable. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Thank you to Nick Coyle and Lifer for allowing me to use their song, Born Again, which you're hearing now and at the intro to the podcast. Thank you to Justin Dillahanty and all of my brothers at the Alpha Code. Please visit the website, risingphoenixpodcast.com, to connect with me and other like-minded men who are looking to thrive and grow after their divorce. And remember to surround yourself with people who add value to your life, who challenge you to be greater than you were yesterday, who sprinkle magic into your existence like you do to theirs. Life is not meant to be done alone. Find your tribe. Take care.